There's a big rock here, did you know that?
Yeah, that's
Is that left over from town council?
no, that's the what's the middle is that? That's the patio at I'm sorry. That's the Danny's East patio.
And it needs to be bigger.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. For those of you who are on the Zoom, can you see the agenda here?
Yes.
Yes, I can see it easily.
Good.
Okay, folks, I'm not waiting for Tom anymore. I'm calling this meeting of the Munster Town Planning Commission to order for Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. Set your phones, stereos to stun, and let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag of the United
States of America, to the
Republic, for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vanderwood, roll call, please. There's 6 feet apart.
No, you can take it off. All right. Stuart Friedman,
Present.
Roland Raffin,
Here.
Brian Specht,
present,
Councilman Gardner, present, Councilman Tulowitzki,
Present.
and Chairman Baker.
Here. All right, folks, we have a quorum. Let's roll. Next is approval of the minutes from July 14th, 2020. Any changes, modifications, motions? What say you?
Mr. Chairman, I review the minutes and I have no problem with them, so I move for them to be accepted.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Tulowitzki.
And a second. Any discussion? Either none, voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Out there for all to see at the Munster Town website. Isn't that true, Mr. Vanderwood?
That is correct.
Absolutely outstanding. Next is preliminary hearings. Evidently there is none. Developmental plan review, pass. Findings of facts, nada. Other business, additional items, PC 19-004, Calumet 8005, Target requests an extension of approval of the Target Corporation's plan to modify the facade treatments and signs at 8005 Calumet Avenue. Mr. Vanderwood.
Thank you. We've received a request from Kimley Horn and Associates on behalf of Target Corporation to extend the approval of their development plan. Submitted in conjunction with a sign variance last summer. Both the variances and the development plan were approved in August of last year. They received the findings of fact were approved for the development plan. And there's a stipulation in our code that says that if they haven't commenced construction on a plan, it expires after a year. And there's an option to renew for another year. And it's kind of just an administrative type of thing, but the Plan Commission is being asked to take a look at this development plan, determine whether or not the circumstances have changed since it was approved, whether or not there's any real legitimate reason why they wouldn't extend it for an additional year, and then just to vote on that. As a reminder for those who were not part of the Planning Commission last year, I'll just kind of briefly describe what they were going to do. Target had sought a variance to install some new signage at the property, including what you see on the screen here, this white Target sign, this white bullseye, which was at the time legal non-conforming. The red bullseye that's on there now is legal non-conforming. And then also to install some order pickup signs here by the front facade. When they submitted that plan, there was a desire to see, they had also requested some facade upgrades. So this area right here, they wanted to clad it in this faux wood paneling, kind of like a tile. wood grain tile. So they went to the Plan Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and after a few different meetings where there was some discussion of how to make the project a little better, they kind of settled on this plan, which has some of that stone wood tile here, some additional landscaping on sort of this blank area with a living green wall, and then they also extended the this faux wood treatment to the entire kind of front vestibule area. In addition to that, they submitted a landscaping plan, which was required because of the cost of the improvements. So you can kind of see on this sketch here, they're kind of adding some trees to the Calumet frontage, filling in some of the gaps down here along Broadmoor, adding some plantings here along the south edge of the building, and then just kind of generally improving all the islands within the parking lot. So those are the plans. As I said, they're good for a year. After that, they expire unless extended by the Plan Commission. I know that we have a representative from Kinley Horn here on the Zoom meeting, but that concludes my report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Tom, can you explain what they have done there so far? Did they just change the logo of the sign so far? Has any work been done? I haven't checked. What's been done so far there?
Nothing.
So the order pickup sign isn't even on the window?
Correct. No, they haven't done a single thing. So they haven't made, they haven't exercised their rights under the variance to add larger signs or anything like that. And we're kind of treating it all as a single package.
Okay.
So when they want to install the new signs, they're going to have to, add the new facade.
So nothing new, no CVS sign or any new signs are put on there that wasn't there before?
Correct. It's exactly the way it was a year ago.
Okay.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Any other questions for Mr. Vanderwood before we let the young lady speak? 1, 2, 3. Yes, ma'am. You have anything to say, Amy, as it relates to what's going on? How did Mr. Vanderwood handle that presentation?
Hi, good evening, Commission and Chairman. Yeah, Tom explained everything exactly correct, and I think it was in the report, but I didn't know if you had mentioned, Tom, so I'll just mention it. The delay is entirely due to COVID. They were scheduled to begin construction this spring, and just across the board, all construction came to a big halt, and there was just a lot of reshuffling to reschedule all of the construction remodels that were planned for this year and then also for next year. So everything kind of just like dominoes got pushed back, and so that's the impetus for the request for the extension.
Thank you. Okay, back to the board. Any questions for Amy as it relates to what Target is trying to do to the property at Calumet Avenue?
Chairman Baker, I have a question. This is Brian.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Amy. Do you expect with this extension that they will do it? I mean, in the current state that the world is in, is it still planned that if things don't change or change, that they will have it done and we'll start construction, in a reasonable period of time?
Yeah, we haven't, we have not heard of any cancelings of any of the entitled remodel projects. It's simply a logistics of they could not get crews on the sites. It's not, it was not a financial barrier or any issue like that they had to pause. It was just literally not safe to have people all on the site at that time. So as far as we can forecast, we haven't seen any cancellations of any of these projects.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
First question would be, once this starts, how long is the anticipated construction timeline for this this project?
So the construction will be interior and exterior remodel. They do it all at the same time. And they're pretty quick turnovers. They range anywhere from 3 to 6 months, but it's usually, somewhere closer to the 4 or 5 month range at the most. So.
And the other thing was, I noticed on the plans that the plans are updated on November 11th to the 19th. Was that in relation to the directives that were given from the approval earlier in the year? Or I see they were updated November 11th, and that seems to be after the approval.
Yeah, if
Amy,
they,
I can speak to that.
okay.
The way that it worked with this particular project is the Plan Commission approved a development plan for the project, but it was contingent upon the receipt of variances for the signage and for the landscaping. So although the two processes started kind of simultaneously, the Board of Zoning Appeals approvals lagged behind the Plan Commission approval. So as the project was being presented in its approved form to the Board of Zoning Appeals, they asked for some additional, basically nothing substantively different from what the Plan Commission approved, but more of an expansion of what they approved. So for example, the original Plan Commission approval didn't have as much of this wood grain tiling on it. It was limited solely to this facade, this kind of front vestibule area here. So, and then some of these landscaping elements were then added later after the Plan Commission approval.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, I have a question. With all the extensive landscaping that comes out of all these developments and redevelopments in town, which is nice, and I'm a big fan of those types of improvements, how is the town handling the updating and or monitoring of the maintenance? Last time I checked, all landscaping needs to be maintained. If it doesn't get maintained, you have a lot of bushes, a lot of trees that look out of control. What's the process as we continue to request private folks to invest real dollars in greenery, but not in doing a maintenance program? Is that something that's unique here, or can you do a maintenance program or have a requirement like that, or do you start overstepping the bounds?
The maintenance of the landscaping is dealt with on a property maintenance code level. So we have a code enforcement officer, or zoning enforcement officer is technically her title, who does monitor landscaping and enforces when there's, when it becomes overgrown, not maintained.
And those are reports that go to whom? The town council?
There are reports that are submitted to the town manager as far as who has been notified. The process that we follow is a code enforcement process. So the initial step is usually a warning. Then there's what's called a notice of violation, which sets a formal timeline. And then if the issue is not addressed within that time frame, then the town issues citations.
Citation. So how long before, from the time the first inspection to a citation, is that timeline?
It varies, but I would say
And what?
usually it varies on the timeline that is given. So on the severity of, if it's weeds or something like that, then that can be addressed very quickly within a matter of weeks. If it's like dead or dying plants.
How about trees? We all see trees laying all over town, and if the trees aren't cut up or maintained in an ongoing maintenance program, and let's say those tree limbs are so low you can't see sight lines making a turn, a safety issue, not just an aesthetic issue. How how long before, you know, something needs to happen on a situation like that? Not too many people, including everybody in the
Yeah, I
room.
believe I have to check on the minimum time that we can give, but it's somewhere in the 2 week, I think.
Because we talk so much about landscaping, yet still driving around, we're still having the same conversation, looking and seeing how well they're upkeeping it and making sure it looks the way it's supposed to look.
Yeah, that's a challenge. It was particularly bad this year, and we kind of relaxed a little bit on the code enforcement, primarily because of.
COVID, because that's the
COVID.
reason nothing happens anymore. right?
Exactly. Well, we didn't feel comfortable kicking everybody when they were already clearly down. So now
Now we
that,
just have trees down.
well, now that everything is kind of back to normal, ish, I'm not sure about the trees. I mean, if there are particular areas that you see, you can just send them to me and we can address them.
I think he was talking about the storm last night.
The folks that are ready to go on tour and start generating that, if you like it, that happen.
Are we talking about commercial or residential?
We're not both.
Okay, well, residential trees are a little bit different, but that's not really a code enforcement issue. That's kind of just a public safety type of thing.
Like the NIPSCO going out again. I'm on day 2 of no power. It's nice in the air conditioning there.
Yeah, you're staying overnight. Let's go.
So okay, well, I'll review that. So we'll talk about that. But I mean, I didn't know if as a part of the approval of making them do the landscaping, I'm thinking specifically about the live wall. Is there irrigation there? Because without watering the live wall, we're just going to see a bunch of not live wall.
I don't recall whether or not there was irrigation included as part of that live wall, but I think there is a note on every landscaping plan that says that it has to be irrigated. So I don't know, maybe Amy can, I don't think she worked on the landscaping plan.
Does it have to be live, or could it be green and we can just make it look aesthetically pleasing without a maintenance request? I'm sure the facilities folks at Target Corp would appreciate that.
So the landscape plans will be spec'd to require irrigation. Whether that is the initial irrigation to just kind of get the plants established, and whether that becomes a more extensive permanent irrigation system. Tom's right, I can't speak to that. I didn't create the landscape plans. I will let you know that we did notice on that south property line, a lot of those trees there that are noted to be replaced are because they are dying, because they're ash trees, likely because of the emerald ash borer that is just kind of everywhere. And so they will be replacing those not with ash trees. We'll be replacing them with something that's more hardy, more resilient to pests and things that are native to Indiana and can just have a better chance at making it without needing maintenance, if that makes sense. So that is as far as I can help you on that issue with these plans.
Yeah, I'll just note that there is a note on the landscaping plan that says it will be irrigated. All landscaped areas will be irrigated.
That's number 20, right?
Yes.
And then that's the responsibility of the code enforcement officer of the town of Munster to make sure that's operational. Please, really?
No, we don't check the actual irrigation systems to determine whether or not they're in good working order or whether or not they're actually being used.
But we make them put them in.
We do, and
I'm just asking.
I mean, the expectation would be if you install the irrigation, you will use the irrigation. Now, we can't guarantee that somebody is going to turn the water. If they don't, and the plants die, that's where we come in and we require them to replace them.
Okay. I mean, in the formal meeting here, then I'd like to specifically request that process as well as the fines. And when's the last time the fines have been modified? Please. Sure. That's it for me, because I know everybody's happy about that. But the premise, just for y'all's edification, is that as we get more and more mature, which we have in a lot of those locations around town, all living things need a little bit of maintenance, and when you don't maintain it, things happen. And the tree that's on Target's property, just as the example here, falls on Broadway. And there's a reason, because it hasn't been maintained, it's not watered, it didn't establish correctly. It's just like cutting the grass or pulling the weeds. That's a living thing that needs to be maintained. If it's not, it looks like duty. And I think that's important, because the premise of this landscaping plan and all the time we spend on it is for the aesthetics of that property. Is that not correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Anyway, all right. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just want to express a level of frustration that it's been a year and this project has not started. As a contractor that's actually worked on target projects in the Chicagoland area, and I've done target remodels for companies in Chicago, finding manpower in Chicago is not a problem. And I'm in the Chicago market all the time. So there's a level of frustration that this project was not completed in a timely fashion over the last year. And I'll be extremely frustrated if Target does not complete this project in the next 12 months, especially since it seems like the town of Munster spent a lot of resources over the last 2 looting processes in the city of Chicago by shutting down Calumet Avenue, by protecting that Target as our biggest store in the town of Munster. So I think Target has a duty to the town of Munster to complete this remodel in a timely fashion, as they did in St. John and Highland and all the other local areas that abut us. That's all I have.
Okay, folks. Anything else?
Chairman,
Yes.
I would make a motion to grant a 1-year extension of the approval of PC docket number 19-004, Target Corporation Developmental Plan approval to add facade treatments and modify signs at 8005 Calumet Avenue.
Got it. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Spectral second.
Okay.
And a second. Any discussion? Raise your hand so I can see if there is. Be there none. Mr. Vanderwood.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Roland Raffin,
No.
okay, Brian Specht,
Yes.
Councilman Tulowitzki,
Yes.
Councilman Gardner,
Yes.
Chairman Baker,
Yes.
motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you, Amy. Please help improve it. That's a very busy location in town. I mean, significantly busy, especially the in and out on Broadmoor there. It's very congested.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you. All right, next up is planning and development project updates. I guess, is this something based on my email, Tom?
Yeah, this is something you asked for.
All right, so one of the things I'm trying to shake it up a little bit, since, I haven't been here as long as Stuart, but instead of doing the same old, is to try to get some kind of an update on some of the things that we've worked on in the past, find out how they're moving along through the process, as well as some of the things that just are noticeable in town, and how those things are progressing through, the town of Munster's world, as opposed to just us resident types.
Okay, can those on the Zoom see, there's a PowerPoint presentation?
No.
Slide
No.
up.
Yet.
It doesn't show up yet.
Okay, let me do this.
You're getting pretty good at this, aren't you?
You learn what you have to learn. How about now? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, now it's up there.
All right, so as Bill said, he asked me to just kind of give you all an update on some of the projects that are happening in town. So I'm going to talk about the streetscaping plan that we've started. And then I'm just going to touch on very briefly a handful of projects that are kind of underway.
Thank you.
All right, so the first project, kind of the main thing that we're doing now after we wrapped up the zoning code, we thought it would be a good idea to take a good look at the public realm. We came up with a lot of good ideas for the design standards for the private sector, for the buildings that get built in town. And now we wanted to kind of take a look at the the public part of our main corridors here and come up with some standards for possible redesign, possible beautification, and that sort of thing for Ridge Road and Calumet. So we're working now on what we call the Calumet Ridge Streetscaping Plan. It's a planning project we expect to be completed next year. The themes of the plan are to promote a safe and comfortable pedestrian environment, a functional streetscape providing stormwater benefits, a consistent and beautiful public realm, a sense of arrival and identity. So to explain that, it would be, how do I know I'm in Munster, right? What is unique about this area that tells me that I'm now in Munster? And then a multimodal system that balances access and mobility. The thought behind that is that we want to be able to continue to provide access to all of our businesses, both pedestrian and automobile access. But we also want to have mobility. So we want people to be able to drive through the town. We want people to be able to walk through the town. So access refers to, accessing the adjacent land uses. Mobility is moving through. So those are the themes that we'll be exploring. We just started on the project, so we don't have a whole lot of information gathered yet, but that's kind of where we're heading. This is the study area. So the limits of the project are basically Ridge Road from the state line east to approximately the Town Hall Center for Performing Arts, and then Calumet Avenue from Jewel north to the river, which is the extent of the town limits. So why are we looking at this area? This is kind of the commercial corridor, the northern commercial hub of the town, and this is the area that's probably been seeing the least amount of new development. So there's been not as many opportunities to really ask the private sector to invest in some of these public amenities. The other real kind of impetus behind this project is we anticipate there will be a train station at Manor Avenue and Ridge Road. So we think that that's likely going to change pretty dramatically the face and the nature of travel on this corridor. We have been planning for transit-oriented development. That's why you have to see this quarter-mile circle on here. That's a quarter-mile represents essentially a walk shed from the, oops, sorry about that. So that's about a 10-minute walk to the train station. So you got to imagine that folks who live within that area are going to be walking down the streets, and how do we provide the types of environments that make that comfortable for them and make that, again, more than simply a situation where they're trying to walk hurriedly to the station, or places where they can linger. The project schedule is shown here. I won't get into it in detail, but you
It's
can
online, right?
the schedule is online, yes. You can see it's a fairly quick project. We're in phase 1 and just getting into phase 2, where we're putting together some preliminary concepts. We're a little bit behind, as most government projects are. But we're really in sort of the community outreach portion of the plan. We're gathering all the data that we need for the existing conditions and conducting some initial traffic analysis and that sort of thing. There's a whole existing conditions report that is in draft form that will be available probably within the next month. We're keeping it as a draft though, because we're continuing to get more information. Estimated completion date for the project is March, or I'd say probably April of next year. You can see there's a couple milestone points in here. These squares labeled TC are town council meetings, and all these little dots or these squares kind of represent various times where we're reaching out and getting more information or getting feedback from either the steering committee, the public, or an agency. So
Or maybe the planning commission.
maybe
Who does this all the time?
Yeah. So there are no planning commission meetings, but that's fine. I can bring those to you and we can get your feedback as we get some of these things. I'll also note that there are members of the town council and the plan commission on the steering committee. So I'll just kind of run through.
Can I ask a question at the end game without reading all that? Because I don't think they'll need to hear that. I was kind of curious more just on how this was going to be used at the end of the day for stuff like what we just saw. Like with the targets, would that be the requirement that they would have to do along those particular thoroughfares that surround their property? Or if Applebee's came up, or Aurelio's, would they be required to meet those specific guidelines that are set by this, if passed by the town council?
So the answer to that is yes and no. Certain aspects of the plan, yes.
Brought to you by David Winklin.
No, that's a good question, and I'll just take it back to this slide. So one of the things, so I think you kind of got to the heart of another reason why we're doing this plan, right? Whenever a development project happens, and we anticipate that there will be a significant amount of development associated, for example, with the train station. Those developers will be required to implement certain aspects of this plan as it relates to the public, what we call the public frontage. So in our zoning ordinance, there is a requirement that the area basically between the curb and your property line, you know, the parkway, the sidewalk, and that sort of thing. If you're doing a new development project, you have to reconstruct that in accordance with the plans of the town. So what that would mean is, you know, you may have to put in a wider sidewalk. You may have to put in parkway trees, street trees. You may be required to beautify that portion of the streetscape that is in front of your building. Now that being said, we don't know what the recommendations are going to be yet because they haven't been developed. We probably won't see any preliminary recommendations at that level of specificity until, you know, the end of this year.
I have a question. So we did, I don't know what number plan it was that we specifically talked about this red area, and it was all new development was going to be pushed up to the street. Is this streetscaping plan going to be on top of the building being required to be pushed up against the street? Should it be a new structure?
Well, this streetscaping plan will be from the property line to the property line.
So yes, so I mean, they all look like Dr. Andy's building. They're pushed up against the sidewalk, and he wants to do a whole new facade. Let's use Andy, right? Now, are you gonna make him do plantings and new streetscape and do all of that as a part of that renovation of that 1930s building?
It depends on,
Possibly.
it depends though entirely on whether you have a law enforcement.
It would depend on the
Yes
scope.
and no.
It would depend on the scope of the project.
And the law would be, Mr. Wicklund, the town council passing an ordinance, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
There's other ways to implement this. So another thing to keep in mind is that specifically within that transit-oriented development area and that transit development district, it's likely that the regional development authority will be participating financially in a lot of these projects. So there's going to be likely, I can't say for certain, but it's likely that there will be various incentives available to developers within this district that they can use on public improvements.
Only in that blue area, though.
No, we haven't drawn the boundaries yet of the transit development district, but it's fairly large, and it probably won't extend into the residential areas.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Tom on this? And just kind of see how this is going to be another layer when everything's done about folks coming in to spend money in this, in my personal opinion, a very needed locations within town as far as seeing some kind of improvement.
Tom, my question is, when we did landscaping ordinance before, the protocol went to the plan commission, and I believe it was passed on the zoning ordinance to the town council. Is this something we're going to see in front of us when this study is completed, that we would make a favorable recommendation to the town council?
The plan is not to bring it to the bring it to the plan commission for a recommendation. It doesn't have the same weight. It's not going to be an ordinance. It's going to be a plan. It's going to be a policy document. So what I would do is I would encourage members of the plan commission to participate in the process. Bill's a member of the steering committee. Leanne Mellon is on the steering committee as well. But there's really going to be a number of different participation opportunities that will be available. We've also done stakeholder interviews with, I think, almost everyone on the planning commission and the board of zoning appeals and the town council. So we're definitely going to get input. It's not going to be approved in the same formal way as we would a zoning ordinance, because it's just not done that way.
So it's a concept. It's a concept, doesn't have a lot of teeth into it. It's just it's an idea you want to put out there to developers, but as the parcels come up, I guess you see what works at the time and what doesn't work, and that's going to be the plan that gets passed.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a policy document, so it'll have certain, and it'll be a plan. So it'll have certain things that will fall in the private sector. It'll have other things that will fall in the town, and it's up to the town to then implement it. And it can be implemented in a number of different ways. It can be implemented through development agreements with developers. It can be implemented through enforcement of a landscaping ordinance. It can be implemented through a direct investment in, in the roadway itself. We don't know what the recommendations are going to be yet, so we don't know who will be the responsible party for each one of those recommendations. But it will likely be everybody, right? So the town staff will have certain things to do. Town council will be asked whether or not they want to proceed with various tasks, and so it'll fall on all of us.
Are you studying traffic and roundabouts and different stuff, or is it strictly landscaping?
No, we're looking at kind of like two things. One, the more aesthetic components of the streetscape. So we're looking at landscaping, lighting, ornamental pavements, things like that. But then banners, public art, all those types of things. But then we're also looking at, we're looking in very, not in engineering level detail, but planning level detail at traffic counts, pedestrian counts, congestion, curb cuts, sidewalk continuity.
You're also looking at potential areas for public spaces, possibly, right?
Yes.
Public gathering spaces that could be used, not used, increasing the store frontage, possibly. Going, the width of the road is in question. How can we get more storefront accessibility is one of the options that people are looking at.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's being done, but so there's
right. Yeah. So we're looking at exactly lane widths, sidewalk widths, crosswalk treatments, signals, signal timing. Again, at a planning level, so not getting into the actual design and detailed engineering of any of these things. We're also looking at public parking. Is there, where can we maybe add or formalize public parking spaces? The town doesn't really own any public parking lots, so we're looking at places where we can implement on-street parking, things like that.
Cool.
All right.
All right,
And
thanks.
so-
Any other questions on this one?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I think there's one other distinction is that this could impact all of any building there, whether or not there's development happening. So the whole site is the whole study area is in play, not just like an ordinance where if there's a change to a building, that's when new rules would come into place. Is that
You know, and I just want to throw out there, again, having private property owners being told without having a request from the government what they need to do with their property. That's always a fun one, and just to make sure that's part of the recipe as you all work through this process.
So just to be clear, the recommendations here will not be, you owner of private property have to now do anything.
Have to paint it red.
It's nothing, the recommendations are not for implementation on private property. It's for the public realm. So the recommendations will stay within the property owned by the town.
So
That's the idea.
the paver brick that's
The
between
public
the
right.
curb and the sidewalk along most of this highlighted area is past its useful life? Just
You
curious.
tell me.
And is
We're
that
still
the public,
taking comment. We're still taking public comment.
that's the public realm, is the
Correct.
brick, or fake brick, whatever it is.
Right, we're talking about the public right of way.
Yeah.
The publicly owned right of way. So it's typically the edge of the sidewalk in front of your house to the edge of the sidewalk across the street.
That has all the easements in it, but I'm still responsible for maintaining it. And
Yes.
working in the trees to make sure they don't fall in the street and do all those kind of things.
Yes.
Got it.
Watering the trees.
Watering the trees, feeding them too, they need to be fertilized.
All right, so yes. So as you can see, this is what we've done so far, right? So we're not at the point where we're developing any recommendations yet. Really what it's gonna come down to is once we get these planning concepts and alternatives, we're gonna start very broad. We're gonna look at, hey, what do we wanna see as kind of like a broad theme for the area? And based on that, we'll kind of narrow it down and we'll come up with some of those specific things. Ultimately, we'll know
Well, and I appreciate it. I mean, you don't have to get in all to the specifics of why. I just wanted to make sure it was introduced to everybody on the plan commission, since we're the ones that have to sit and listen to the target people come up and talk about the things that are required.
Sure. And, as I said, we have an existing conditions report underway. We can definitely present that and distribute it to the planning commission on completion. Next project that I'll talk about a little bit is this development proposal for the Lansing Country Club.
Just did this one, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, let me just check the Zoom here to make sure that there's nobody waiting.
You guys at home can see that, right?
Yep.
That development plan. And one of the things while he's working on the tech that I just asked is that, as whether it's this particular developer or any developer, that's one of the last parcels of property that's developable in town. And one of the most, prudent things that came out of that last meeting is how are we as the municipality embracing new development as far as access to the site? And I thought maybe there would be a good opportunity as it kind of digests it, if Tom could help as far as what y'all are thinking or how we could collaborate on trying to provide some options so people can come to town and spend millions of dollars to improve this. And hopefully they're taxable.
Yeah. So this is a plan, and this is, again, very early on in the process. You all were invited to a joint study session with the town council, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? But there's a group from Massachusetts, believe it or not, or Connecticut, one of the North New England states, called Saxon, the Saxon Group, and they're working with the Lansing Country Club to acquire that property. And this is kind of the concept that they presented to the town for the development. And it's primarily a medical office park, for lack of a better term. They've got sort of mixed-use commercial and office buildings, some flex space, and what they're calling innovation buildings. We're not exactly sure what all the uses are within those spaces, but this is the kind of the site plan that they have. You'll probably notice that the Illinois portion of the Lansing Country Club is not included in this plan. What they're doing is they're working with the Cook County Forest Preserve District to, if they implement this project, they would hand over the Illinois portion to the Cook County Forest Reserve in order to provide some, multi-use trail connectivity through the site. But this is the site, as I said. They're building it according to the actual zoning that it is, which is a CD4B zoning, which is a mixed-use zoning. They're not proposing any residential development. It's all commercial, 3 and 2-story buildings.
No warehousing, right?
No, they're in this district, manufacturing, warehousing, distribution are all prohibited uses, and they're not seeking to change any zoning.
Okay.
So that's a good question though, because if this project comes to fruition, they will be coming to the Plan Commission, and what they'll be doing is submitting. It's not a plan unit development. They would be submitting an application for a commercial subdivision. So with that subdivision, they would be required to provide a plan, which you see here. And the process would be somewhat similar to what we did with Maple Leaf, except for a little bit more straightforward, because there would be no negotiation as far as the development standards. They're proposing to adhere to all of our development standards. But yeah, there would be a commercial subdivision. We'd have some preliminary meetings with them to approve what's called a development parcel plan. And what we would do is, as a staff, we would basically review this overall plan and determine whether or not it complies with our standards. If it does, we would certify that, and then that would be submitted with the application to the Plan Commission, so they would have basically the certainty that everything was being built according to this development plan.
So have you guys did anything more with regards to getting in and out of there? And, I'm going to be all over if you're going to be forcing everything up Maple Leaf Lane and to that light, and how that's all going to work. So I'm just kind of curious, regardless of what happens with all the cool pictures and all the buildings and whatnot, how are you going to get them to Calumet Ave?
So that's a good question. They're right now in the process of developing an actual detailed traffic analysis and traffic study. So first thing that they're going to do is try to quantify how much traffic are they generating and where is it coming from, where is it going. It'll be much more detailed than the study that was prepared by Maple Leaf Crossing. It'll actually, like I said, it'll actually have traffic volumes, anticipated volumes, origin, destinations, and those types of things.
Can I ask a question? I don't want to stop you on your train of thought, because those are great things. How often are those reviewed? For example, those types of traffic things and those projections that were done on Centennial Village, when they were supposed to go in a different process, but now they did exactly what we talked about. It built all the retail and the hotel. How has that done anything, or how are we tracking how those projections were done? Or is this just another document that's kind of put in the file? Here we go.
As far as whether or not they're
generating that type of volume, are they correct?
Yeah,
I know we have these boxes everybody has to check.
We're not going through and reviewing them to make sure, we're not sitting out there in county traffic, but if there was some indication that things were not proceeding as we had thought, what we could do is, because that project is not built out yet, we could require another traffic study. It may be a good idea with Centennial Village to do that anyway, because of the dramatic change in traffic patterns that we'll get when 45th Street opens.
Because the same thing happened at Lake Business Center. It wasn't the same plan that we approved, and what did that do to how much more truck volume did come out of that than what was originally pitched when we approved it?
Yeah.
I don't know. How is that traffic, impacting all of this? I mean, that was my whole goal of trying to get this whole thing looked at as a big picture, because I'm just gonna say, whether I'm part of it or not, and still a steward at the time, the possibility of additional truck traffic is just gonna put so much pressure on there. And then in the middle of it, we put a park and a bunch of houses with driveways. Because I don't see anything wrong with that.
Which one are you talking about right now?
Hey,
Well, in
Tom,
the middle of doing all of this, and then you go north and you go, there's a park we have, town, it's called Community Park, and then across the street, there's a whole block of houses with driveways.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be honest with you, the town should be doing sort of like their own traffic analysis periodically. That's an engineering study that should be done just, we should probably do a townwide study after 45th Street is open, because that's really going to change things. And I think that's going to play into, some of the discussion of the Calumet Avenue underpass, when and how to do that second part of that project.
Tom, why isn't this development connecting to Wentworth Avenue at all?
That's a good question. I think
I mean, that can get you access to 45th Street where you don't have to have cars coming through Munster.
Yeah, so to go to speak about the access points, you'll notice that there are a couple areas where they sort of stubbed out. And one of those is going west into Wentworth. And to be honest with you, I think that's probably a contentious question. I don't know who would be in favor and who would be opposed to making that connection, but it's certainly something that the Plan Commission can weigh in on. I'll tell you that it likely will drive up the traffic on Fisher. I mean,
Absolutely.
if this is not open, this is kind of like a loop going through here. If it is open, it becomes a thoroughfare.
At the meeting, didn't they talk about another option of coming out to 45th by building number 10 and 9? Is this an updated drawing that they took that option off?
No, this is the same drawing. It's just there's another page in there that talked about all the other options. I just pulled this one out. But yeah, you see this dotted line here. That's a potential right-of-way to connect over the CN tracks to Margot Lane. So that's probably the most expensive connection that they would make, but.
And CNN agreeing to a grade crossing, right? Because don't you have to engage them for that type of development? They have to approve that.
I doubt that we would be able to get a grade crossing. So it would have to be a grade separated crossing, either a bridge or an underpass. So that's a complex project, but.
Why is that, Tom?
Why would they not agree to a grade crossing?
Yeah.
It's a safety issue for them.
Right.
And Councilman, the railroad is almost more difficult to deal with than any governmental entity, under the premise the statement usually defaults to, we were here first.
Yeah,
Are they asking for any money?
Oh, yeah.
So just to talk about the access points, they're also looking at
Give
connecting
money.
to Fisher, and then there's a connection east to the new Maple Leaf Boulevard, and then they want to put a connection in to the Lake Business Park. At the study session that was attended by members of the Plan Commission and the Town Council, they did bring up the idea of a TIF, some kind of development agreement utilizing TIF funds to help pay for the public infrastructure. So that none of that's really been negotiated yet. It's kind of just been discussed, it's been brought up. But the initial suggestion at that meeting was a suggestion from the developer was that the town could participate in, again, some of these access points because they will be public infrastructure.
And that was one of the premises in asking Tom for this, for the four of us that are not elected, at least think about how this is gonna work, what would be most beneficial for the town as far as providing ingress, egress to the site itself, regardless of whether it's Saxon or whomever, just to have some kind of a foundation, if you will, to help people spend millions of dollars in town.
And
Whatever is developed there is gonna have to have some type of access.
Absolutely.
And
Might as well have a plan for it.
And if we can at least start looking at what type of access would help us with other portions of town in this area of connecting different parts of town together, now is the time to be looking at it.
If you ask my opinion as a planner, I think the town desperately needs additional east-west and north-south connectivity. I mean,
We have some, we could approve of a lot too.
there's no question. I mean, we can't really add lanes to any of our roads anymore. You can't
Main
really
Street.
widen Calumet.
Main
Main
Street.
Street, that's about the only one. You can't widen Ridge. You know, we're doing a streetscaping plan on Ridge right now to talk about how can we improve the pedestrian route. It won't be improved by trying to add lanes to it. So you can't add lanes to Ridge. You can't add lanes to Calumet Avenue. You can add lanes going east and west, but only by adding new roads. So from a sort of a town-wide transportation network standpoint, I think I agree with you all who have said tonight that, yeah, we really need to be thinking about how can we not just add an access point for this one development, but how can we use this to benefit the entire town?
So who outside of a developer from Massachusetts that grew up in Illinois on the south side or east side would be able to help us with how to be able to provide that connectivity to this development parcel? That's something that would be advocated by the municipality as opposed to us counter-punching always.
Well, I mean, typically what you would do is you would have a town-wide transportation plan that would lay out where, you know, you go through a public process, you adopt a plan, and that would spell out the need for various.
That wasn't the 2050 thing that we did? That was arduous as all get out.
Well, I think there are certain things included in that plan. You're talking about the 2010 master plan. That plan did include a connection at Fisher going west into Illinois.
But we don't advocate the things that I've seen in all the plans that I've got my hands on. They're just there and then that's it. And then administrations change and plan commission changes. I like how you did that.
Is that all? Is that in the minutes?
No, but they need to be introduced as well in a timely manner, and we can help with that. It's just trying to make sure we all get on the same page, especially as we have these projects both already in full bloom and the ones that are on the drawing board. That's all.
I agree.
All right. So again, I don't know what y'all think, but right now, the way this thing looks, it's just putting a bunch of pressure on already overworked Pepsi and Lake Business Center. That's what I see. And when I saw this during the plan commission or the study session, I mean, I'm all for it. It's a great project. Let's go. But you know, you have to look at the big picture as it relates to this one and what's going to happen. You know, all along that corridor north of 45th Street. Sorry. All right. What's the next step on this one? Just keep talking about it and keep waiting for them to come in, and then we'll just keep going. As far as that.
Yeah, I mean, the next step is we'll be meeting with them as they refine their site plan. We'll be meeting with the members, you know, with Dustin and Dave Westland, talking about a development agreement. Probably coming back to the town council at a certain point with some additional information. Like I said, with respect to the plan commission approvals, there will be a subdivision approval. So all that public infrastructure that we're talking about, the road network, the stormwater, All of that will be reviewed and approved or not by the planning commission. So you'll have an option or an opportunity to weigh in on all of this.
Yeah. But usually we're the bad guy because it's already all done and went through staff, and then we get a chance to talk about it. That's kind of what I would look to try to be engaged with at the beginning, because as of right now, it looks like you're all okay advocating for pushing traffic onto Maple Leaf Boulevard.
I think that's one connection that's going to have to happen, but I don't think it should be the only connection. That's just my planning perspective.
And I would say, can we put together a temporary transportation plan? Because I see that the roadway going to the Lake Business Center, I think, is a disaster. That's back and forth. There's no good, that's just going to cause.
And speed bumps,
Yeah.
and trucks, and people from Nebraska.
And even now, we have all kinds of left-hand turns coming out of Lake Business Center, turn left at uncontrolled, at intersections with no lights and everything else.
Is that true?
And the Maple Leaf thing is fine for traffic, but I don't think we want more traffic going down there. I think, so I would really look at, this is a huge development, and I think if we can put together some type of transportation, at least what we want to get out of this thing. And again, certainly there's a concern of putting more traffic on Fisher Street, but can that be improved and again, keep that traffic going up to Calumet Avenue? But again, I kind of still see that traffic coming out of the south end down to 45th is being pretty important in this thing. I know it's a very expensive, very, tedious type thing to come out looking at, but I think that's a key thing here. And I think that could help, even I think we talked at one time, some of the Westlakes, conversations of trying to get those guys in. We're still going to have the ad grade crossing at Calumet Avenue. This might be the way to alleviate some of the traffic on Calumet Avenue by getting some of that traffic over to Fisher Street. And again, but then again, can Fisher Street handle this stuff too? It's
Well, I guess the next step really, they're as I said, they're putting together a traffic study and a traffic analysis. I think we can take a look at that, see what it's telling us, and based on that, that'll give us at least a foundation of data where we can say, all right, we like what you're doing here, but we want you to look at this connection as well, or we want you to eliminate this.
Yeah, and let's look at NIPSCO with that big power plant right here and a brand new electric train going by. Maybe they could help digging a tunnel underneath the CN line.
No, I take Wentworth to 45th home almost every single night. I would like to see a connection that way if possible too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at an aerial map, there's the tie-in. I mean, you have to go over the railroad tracks, but where the FedEx delivery location is at, and there's a street. It's a street just for those buildings in there, but you could tie that into, then move that north. You'd have to go over the tracks, but I'd much rather have it going straight down to 45th Street than adding another east-west corridor. Is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And the new train's there too. So remember, the new train line is going to be a bridge. So it's going to be like a 9-span for I don't know how long, but that's going to change the look of that entire part of town. Okay. What else you guys up on that one? So I was just kind of hopeful y'all think about this to the point where they don't come and want to spend millions and start, getting an underground permit next week, and we're talking about how the traffic's going in and out.
Tom, I was wondering if there is an update. They were going to give us some information on the similar development in Mishawaka, and also pulled together a team to look at their TIF proposals. Have either of those things happened yet? And I would love to hear from the Plan Commission your experience with TIF. Roland, you brought it up. What are you guys thinking? Chuck and I, this will be our first time going through such an agreement from the council.
That's over my pay grade, Councilman. That's your guys and
my as well,
and your legal team.
It's way above my $50 a month pay grade.
The only thing I use, the TIF agreement, is
Started
make
meeting
sure,
on time for you, Brian.
the only thing I like to see the town with, when it comes to TIF agreements, is to make sure we get the buildings, the style and all that, and the uses that we want to see for this property, as we're giving out millions of dollars to help subsidize it.
Well,
Okay.
you know, and I'll weigh in, Councilman, you know,
Yeah.
once that overview comes from staff to you guys, I think that's more best, a better avenue, and then give you kind of some feedback from, you know, my side of the fence as it relates to what I've seen in the past.
Okay, thank you.
So
And just, I'm sorry, just the other suggestion is look at what they did at Lake Business Center and look what they did at Centennial Village. And then there's two ways, you know, those are two different financing terms, because what happens with these types of things, whether it's infrastructure or some offset, I'm always of the opinion the town then becomes a development partner. And once they do, there's a different perspective. But you have to have somebody that's going to be going to those meetings and being that ownership person and, you know, defending the flank, if you will.
Yeah, Bill, I think that's a good point. This project is not something that's happening to the town. It's not like a project where they're gonna come in and they're gonna give us this, and this is what we have to do, because this project can't happen without the town's participation. And that was really part of the reason why they wanted to do that study session, is to say, listen, we want to do a project here. We think this is a great project, but we really need the assistance of the town, not only from a financial standpoint to build some of this infrastructure, but also just to gain access to the site. There is no physical connection to this site that doesn't pass through town-owned property. Okay, so the town owns this. Can you see my little cursor? The town owns this right away. Okay, so they need to acquire or improve town-owned property in order to make this work. So they do want to be, as far as I can tell, they do want to be a partner on this. But I think it is good to keep in mind, like, if we have ideas that we want to see implemented, we need to tell them that. They'll, you know, if they decide ultimately they can't do it, then that's another conversation. But so far, they've been open to all the suggestions that we've given to them.
Thank you. I'm getting tired.
Okay, the next one's gonna be quick. All right, so these are just some development updates.
How many are there, Tom, out of curiosity?
I think there are 4 or 5, so not a whole lot. Just real briefly, I'm just gonna give you a kind of a status update on each one of these projects. You might recognize this as it almost looks like a drawing, but it's actually a photo that I took today of
You left it wide
North
open.
Point Orthopedics building. So 9445 Calumet Avenue. The latest thing that was this project, they came in to get an additional set of variances for their landscaping. That was because of a pipeline easement that prohibited.
Oh, we sat through that meeting.
Oh, yeah, you were all there. Okay, so you already saw. I won't go over that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, as you can see, they are now at the point where they're installing the landscaping. They poured all the curbing.
When are they gonna CO?
What's that?
When are they gonna CO?
Not until, let me check my notes here. They're hoping to have one in September.
September, next month.
Yeah, in
Nice.
September. So, the exterior is nearly done. You can see there's some additional work that needs to be done on this canopy. But other than that, it's pretty much done. They're installing, they're doing the roughs inside, and they haven't done any finish work yet, but, this will be, the North Point Orthopedics will be in, I think, this section, and then this section will be a community hospital facility, which is also getting built out simultaneous with North Point. So yeah, they estimate that they're shooting for September.
Right.
This is the Kitty Academy building. This is at 10419 Calumet. I believe I can't see that.
Oh, that's by what, CVS,
So this
Yeah.
is behind Dunkin' Donuts,
behind Dunkin' Donuts.
kind of tucked away in the
The
corner.
new Dunkin' Donuts.
Right, Dunkin' Donuts tucked away in the corner.
That's where the protesters are standing out in front.
Yeah, they were gone this afternoon. So yeah, so they're, as you can see, they're working on some of the masonry on the exterior. You can't really see it in this picture, but this is all kind of a red brick. And then this portion here, this is the Kitty Academy portion. And then this is gonna be the, an office building. So likely a medical or professional office. They're putting a little bit different stone on here. You might remember from when you approved it. But it's more of a kind of a cut limestone look on the south edge here. But yeah, they're doing work inside, putting up drywall. This part will be built out completely, and this section will be left unfinished until they get a tenant.
Vanilla box. Tom, don't forget to make sure the developer works with you on a landscape plan that we talked about that buffers between the Kitty Academy and the townhouses there for lights and noise and all that.
Talking about on the north end there.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the north end and also the east end, because there's townhouses behind it to the east.
Yeah, they have, they're somewhat limited in what they can do back there because there's an easement, but they are planning on putting in a row of trees on both sides, and there will be a fence installed. So in addition to the berm that's already there. But they're looking to, you know what, actually I misspoke, it's November for North Point. North Point is hoping for November. Kitty Academy is hoping to open in September. And they actually have like 50 or 60 people, 50 to 60 people on a waiting list to get in.
Nice.
So even with the pandemic situation, people are still, you know, hoping to get their kids into this.
They have to go to work so they can pay taxes.
Yeah.
That landscaping is growing.
Yeah, that's nice landscape.
Yeah, is that the overgrown, is that the maintenance plan?
Exactly.
It's green.
So they have not started on their landscape,
It's not that.
but there will be lots of trees in that parking lot. Centennial Village Building B, if you've driven out there, you'll see that it's nearly done with the exterior. They too are kind of leaving this section empty until they get a tenant. They do have a confirmed tenant for this section, which is a Rush Orthopedics.
Are you kidding? It's gonna be a medical facility?
The Warmville community people need to get their hips placed. So that's this section here.
They're the only ones that'll pay the rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, the COVID has certainly put a damper on retail and restaurant starts. But
It's gonna be another medical building.
I didn't take a picture of this. This is actually the rendering. You might recall that when the project was approved, the development plan was approved, it was approved contingent upon adding some additional kind of visual presence on the corner there of, that would be the southeast corner of 45th Street and Calumet. So this is the new 45th Street heading this way, and this is Calumet going this way. So this is what it'll kind of look like from the corner.
Wait a minute, I thought they had to come back to us for a signage approval because they didn't have it all done, because we were still working on 45th. I thought we had a whole signage thing that was still left outstanding there, so they just didn't put up a little tin sign. Because that is the face of that whole development.
No, there is, that wasn't a requirement that they
No?
come back. The signage has to comply with the sign ordinance.
Well, it's a
So-
PUD. Roland, don't you remember a whole conversation about that?
We
That
talked about
corner? No?
we talked about approving some of the signs in the future.
So what they did was, Bill, when they came in, the building didn't quite look like this. This tower was not as tall or as prominent. And this garden area wasn't part of it either. So what they've done to kind of address those comments, which were left as a condition to be approved by staff, is they increase the height of this tower. And they added this kind of ornamental fence surrounding the outdoor patio area and the garden this area.
Should have had to put a
They
fountain there,
cannot-
Tom.
There's a pipeline that runs through there, so they can't plant any trees. But actually, this sign that's shown here, we were just speaking with Matt Kimmel today about it because it's not technically permitted under our zoning code or the PUD standard. So this is actually going to change. It's going to be more like less of a tin box, as you say, and more of a sort of an architectural feature of the building. So that'll change, but everything else will kind of be the same. The plan is to get going with some of this landscaping treatment in front of, on the west side of the building here, within the next month or so, when the weather's nicer, not so hot. And then this area, because it's part of that 45th Street reconstruction, will be probably delayed until October. So that's what's going on with building B.
I got a question on this. Is there any way we can stop them from doing any more commercial buildings until they go vertical in the residential?
Great question. Great segue. So the next building that they're working on is called Building G. That's the 4-story mixed-use building directly east of Building C. Yeah, so here's Building C. This is El Salto. You can't really see the sign there, but and then this is the building that we were just looking at, Building B. And they broke ground on Building G about 4 weeks ago. What they're digging out here is the underground resident parking. You can see this is the ramp. Kind of see this is the ramp going down into the parking garage. This is the curb line here for North Centennial Drive. And they've been working on this for about 4 weeks.
Is it filled up with water at all?
No, actually not. It's dry in there.
Nice.
I think they dug out all the clay, so now it's just
Garbage.
No, this is a clean site. There's no garbage on
Thanks,
this,
Bill.
on this development site.
So I have a question. Did they, did you approve the building itself as it relates to a building plan? Obviously, if they're building it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it still just one elevator?
I don't remember how many
Okay.
elevators are in. It hasn't changed since it came to the planning commission.
Okay. So just so everybody knows, there'd be one elevator there for 4 stories of building, 1 commercial, 3 residential,
Right, so
with underground parking. So when, Spec has got all of his grandkids and everybody down in the basement, and he's loading them up, and he's got the elevator open, you're not gonna be able to get downstairs.
Well, it's a walking community, Bill.
Well, it is walkable, I understand, walking stairs when you're a grandpa. Is there a code, building code for elevators, how many per square foot?
I'm sure there is. I don't know it off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I'm sure this meets that code.
I'd be interested.
Well, I'm sure.
We did address that issue of the residential, the elevators of the building, and that I wanted one more elevator, but I don't remember how we.
Well, we couldn't do anything about it, Stuart. That was the whole thing. We just talked about it, and I was just curious if they moved on it, because it's expensive to build an elevator shaft and really expensive to maintain them. But, just like we talked, I mean, that'll be something that the people that move in will deal with.
Yeah, because when I retired, I want to bring my baby grand piano into that elevator. I wasn't going to be.
Sure.
I think they're trying to drive business to the hip replacement place, building
Straight to
B.
Rush. There'll be an underground right to Rush. Well, that's cool. So how, they're obviously going to try to pour the foundation before it snows.
Yeah, they hope to have it quote unquote under roof by December.
Okay.
And then,
So when are we done with 45th? Is that by December too?
yes,
Really?
yes, that's the plan.
Cool.
Substantial completion.
To drive in it.
Yeah. So there's some few, there's gonna be a few little punch list items that they'll have to go through after that, but that is the plan. So yeah, so that project is underway, Brian. So yeah, they're not planning on building any more commercial buildings until they've done the first.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Also,
then
I read about that in the
finally-
paper today.
Did you? Yeah, so Aurelio's is,
The
Open
ugliest
budget.
building on Ridge Road.
Billy, you can get your sausage pizza, baby.
Oh, 2 years it's been. I mean,
It's
I
the
was going the
sauce.
whole one.
I bet you now with COVID, he was begging he built the outdoor patio.
Yeah.
that's what we were just saying. It would
Yep.
be nice to have that outdoor patio.
Yeah.
Looks a little barren though.
Not a single tree in the parking lot. What's that?
Well, we didn't make them put trees in the parking lot, did we? No, because you can't do new, it was new islands. We were on the perimeter, I thought.
It does look nicer than the old building, though.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, cool.
That's it. Is there any other projects that anyone has any questions about? I think you covered all the active.
No, you did a great job, Tom.
Yeah, no, the only other question that I had was about the timing of the BZA and the planning commission. So we were talking about moving them, and Stuart didn't like that. And I talked about maybe going in front of the BZA, but there was a premise that didn't work either, because sometimes we need their approval to do stuff. Or can we do that?
You can do anything you want. I mean, we can
Oh,
do
we
it
can't
however
do
we want.
Don't tell Bill
Can't do
that.
anything.
I mean, oftentimes there are conditional approvals.
Well, we had talked about making the BZA meeting maybe at 6:30, so to allow an hour, for the BZA, and then having 7:30 be the time continuing with the planning commission.
Right, which I thought we sent that to the town council.
As a
Councilman, was anything mentioned or discussed?
Hasn't been brought to the town council yet.
It was, I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I
Was it
think
not
if
brought?
that happens, the staff has to talk to BZA. BZA has to make a decision if a 6:30 meeting is going to be okay for them. If members of BZA cannot make it at 6:30, then we have some other issue we got to talk about.
And the other idea I had,
Tom,
just,
can you do that by email? Because I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I can informally poll.
Yeah, I mean, I will agree to that too.
because the other idea that I was thinking about is just to have it be a little bit safe, since we had this tit for tat, is just let the planning commission go first for a couple of times and start them at 7, and the BZA starts at 7:30. And let the BZA sit through some planning commission meetings for a while. So that's another idea without moving the time.
Sometimes if, like we find that there are businesses who continually have trash laying on the ground and their dumpster is overflowing, they'll tell us, well, our dumpster is too small. We have too much garbage, we can't fit it all in the dumpster. And then we tell them, well, you might have to have the garbage truck
Come often.
twice a week instead of once a week.
Absolutely.
So not that I'm suggesting we have more meetings, but
Well, we
if
can
we
do that.
met every 2 weeks.
When the stipend goes up, which hasn't gone up in 25 years. Stuart, have you ever got a raise?
Have I ever gotten a raise? I don't remember.
No, so that would be no.
In all due respect, Mr. Chairman, as a BZA chairman, I thought I only had one agenda item on this meeting tonight.
Oh, well played. I've already texted Baker. I thought this was going to be a short meeting, and an
Me
hour and a half
too.
later.
Yeah, well, he tried to get it canceled, and I wouldn't let him.
I mean, the half-hour slot no longer works for the
For the
BZA and for everybody
no.
else. So,
No, it should be an hour, at least an hour.
yeah, so a half-hour slot is not so we got to try to come up with a solution. So we'll discuss it at the BZA and or do a question it by email and see if everybody agrees to that.
I've got a solution to end this meeting.
Motion.
Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion is second, all's in favor? Aye.
Aye.
See you guys, thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Is there any, there's no, what's the premise of having it on the same night other than it's easy if I'm sitting on the BZA or